We,
It's always good.
you good on your side?
Ask the host to give you permission.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. We had a little bit of an issue there. I forgot to give Brandon the ability to record, but again, I noticed that last month, a lot of you, particularly the new members, really enjoyed the conversation that Brandon and myself had. And of course, Brandon being a very good friend, I was going to have him on anyway. So without further ado, brother, how you doing? How have you been? And if you could just repeat what you had said to me before we started recording about NPCs and diving into that today.
Oh, dude, I've been. First of all, it's so good to see you, dude, and thank you all for listening, for your kind words. This is always just such a cool thing. You're a brother anyway, so this works out wonderfully. Yeah, so we were just talking about. It's been on my mind lately. The thought of like all the human beings here and all these people and this idea of overpopulation and things like that. And I heard a talk in the midst of this just conversation in my head about all of this stuff, and it was of a gentleman that basically the talk was about NPCs or non-playable characters here, which fits into the simulation argument or idea rather. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be mechanical simulation. It could be like an organic simulation where we're all biological beings, and we kind of don't really know what we really are anyway or what this place is, so it's all open for conjecture. But this gentleman was talking about this, and one of the things he said was that he speculates that there's probably only about 100 million souls on the planet. Now, if you think about, what are we up to, 8 billion people now? If you think about that number versus 100 million of them being actual, what we would call souls or animated bodies with a spirit, with an intent, with a goal, with a desire, all of those type of things. Now, everybody else populating this place, minus the 100 million, are what they call NPCs or filler people or background people. So this got the mind just completely wandering, and then now I'm applying it to my thoughts about the Great Awakening. This, if it's cyclical, if whatever's going on, we can all look around in our reality and look right now and say that there are a lot more people, looking at yoga, and a lot more people wanting to buy crystals, and a lot more people wanting to question their reality and looking at this unity consciousness idea, and it seems to just have sprung up, right, or just happened. Now, rather this is a natural, again, cyclical byproduct of this place, or let's say that that cyclical byproduct includes our idea that we're in a simulation, you apply it to this model of that there are only 100 million people here, then what I've been thinking a lot about lately is perhaps what's happening is this great awakening or this great animation is just that. It's an animation of all of the NPCs here that are being inhabited by actual souls and spirits with goals, motives, desires, all of that. But their desires and motives are to change this place for the better. And maybe this is what this cyclical thing is. They kind of ramp down the amount of people here, filler people, let's call it, that have actual souls that then bring about this age of deception, this snuffing of ideas because there's a narrative controlled there. But then when you increase the amount of people, which again could be cyclical, and just tap them into, you're like, all right, everybody go. And there's a wave of spiritual beings that just tap into these vessels here. Because one of the wonderful stories about contact that I've heard that I refer to a lot is that the alien grays consider us vessels. And even when you look at things like Tesla's talks about that he's just a receiver for his information, whenever you really zoom out a little bit and look at that, then you could say, okay, well, perhaps we're all vessels for something. And that really, like mine and your body, Dave, are inhabited by spirits. And I know the people listening here, you guys are real. You guys are real folks. And then there's just a bunch of filler people around there. Another thing that kind of makes me think about this is the idea that, whenever, like, if you look around, like my family, I'm the only one like me in my family. Everybody else is very like, here's the narrative, I'm sticking to it, this is what's going on, and nothing will change my mind, which is fine. That's necessary and valuable in this place. But what I've been also thinking about is how far apart we're all spread from one another. Now, like Zoom and the internet and things have been really able to connect us. But if you look around, like I live in Millsap, Texas, population of about 600 people. My wife and I are probably the only people out here having the types of conversations that you and I do, Dave. And so when you look at that, it's like, well, why are you planted, in a bunch of people who aren't like that, or it's very hard to get through them in that way? And I think that this is just part of this experience. I think that you're meant to hold that energy where you're at, and then to grow where you're planted. So a lot in there, basically just like NPCs are running around all over the place, and perhaps are being tapped into by these, either angelic or spiritual beings, whatever, that are here to help raise the vibration of this place. That's what's been on my mind lately. I've just been thinking about it. What do you think?
Well, first off, that's incredible, and I want to say that I was actually making some notes as you were speaking because talk about synchronicities. I won't because I they haven't given me permission to shout them out, but there's some members that I've been speaking to, a handful of them that have been talking to me that I've also been experiencing myself, this idea that you can or your spirit, your chi, your prana, your isness, your soul can do more than what your physical body feels its limitations are. So I've spoken to some people that I've also experienced myself where it's not that I don't want to sleep, it's that when I'm getting tired now, I can, for example, and everyone else has this capability as well, feel the difference between the you and your container vessel body, you name it. I'm not trying to make that in a malevolent negative sense, but you just feel like there's a you can do so much more. But then that begs us to think of the question: okay, you can cut your legs off, you can cut your arms off, but you're still you. So the question becomes, what makes you you? In the sense that, for example, actually, if I may, I'm going to look up in real time very quickly the RoboCop film, the reboot, where we see here, I'm just about to share my screen. Um, one second here. There was a scene from RoboCop, the reboot movie, where essentially, here we go. Long story short, you can basically break the human body down. And I know this may be a little bit disturbing for some, so please forgive me. But you can essentially break the human body down to just a few basic organs for quote unquote livable survival. Now, maybe not livable, but definitely for survival. So the question becomes, what is it within that particular area of whether the nervous system, the cells, the brain, the eyes, where, okay, the heart, the lungs, what is it that needs to be removed for ultimate quote unquote physical perhaps death, if you will, right? And that begs the question, what makes you you, which then brings us back to this idea of NPCs. Are there NPCs that do not have a, for lack of a better term, you in them, right? Like a source within them? And I don't have the answer whatsoever, but it's yeah, it's very interesting to see the way that this, when you really break it down, you got the nervous system, you got the brain, you have, the eyes, things like this. But then you go one layer deeper, and then it goes into sort of like the underlying architect. I forgot his name. Michael Levin, I think, is his name, if I'm not mistaken, having to do with sort of there being him claiming there's some type of underlying electromagnetic template to being able to, say, for example, move a human face from the head to the stomach, but the template of the mouth, the nose, and the eyes, just the template, if you will, not the actual structure of the bones and all that. So you're not taking the head and putting it on the stomach. You're moving just the template of just the eyes and where they would spring up upon birth, which implies that there is an underlying substrate or blueprint or some type of energy underneath this one, for lack of a better term. And then this begs the question again. This then leads us to topology, whereas they say if it's stackable, it's hackable. So this idea of, again, you look at topology, and this is when some may argue as well. This is when you merge, the physics with metaphysics. This idea that you can sort of reach in. Let's see here. Here we are. This idea of depth within a local area, sort of like right in front of you, but within this ring, you reach into that ring, and as you look into the ring, it's like, again, reaching into a purse or a bag that is whatever you have designated it to be, whether via your intent or whether via a nuts and bolts type of apparatus. But it's the same, and we see here different layers, which speaks to this idea of fractals, harmonics, the zoom in, the zoom out, the micro, the macro, which then also makes us think, okay, if this is possible, if we take this ring, imagine if we apply that to example, a network node, a computer node, right? For example, every time we zoom into the node, there is no limit to the node because it's constantly zooming in more and more by definition, which would imply that what they teach us in school with, zero in mathematics is by definition not zero. There is a comprising force.
Yeah.
So,
Dude, outstanding. And I've heard of these, and back to what you said about your eyes and stuff being in your stomach, I've heard of these meditation techniques where they can actually physically make you see from your knee. Also, I've heard of people waking up out of dreams to where they thought that their eyes were located on their knee specifically. For some reason, I have several examples of stories I've heard from the knee specifically. And basically to where they were now seeing from their knee level, and they could view their world and look back up at themselves it's really interesting and trippy how one of your faculties can be reassigned on your body. And this is to what you said about the topology. This also makes me think of like things like what we would consider deformities. So like people born like cyclopses and stuff like that. There's a template out there for that. So this would mean also things like the Greys, things like reptilians. There's templates for that. There's structures in which already exist, and basically you can choose whichever avatar, but that avatar is kind of assigned to a specific region or even physical location, even if it's non-physical from our perspective. It's
Assigned to a
wild.
specific like superstructure or super system.
Yeah, that
Right.
either has access or does not have access to certain things, or exists in a vibrational frequency to where they're hidden, where the real information's hidden, but it can be discovered, which is again part of the experience. So let's say that you're a human and you want to live in this structure and you hop into this reality and now you're running around. Well, you're very limited, from straight from the go, with all the ego structures here, and I think it's kind of all part of the process. But to what we're talking about here specifically, if you look at this like this now, that it's part of this process, and so therefore you have to figure it out. Maybe the people who choose the reptilian, let's say, bioform, they're born with this awareness and they kind of get a jump start on what's happening here. You can think of like third world peoples versus first world peoples, right, as far as the information that they're given.
Brandon, thank you, thank you, thank you, because I wanted to jump into this idea, if, and actually I wasn't planning to, but this idea that when someone understands themselves, and I want to be very careful because I do believe there is in fact a thin but fine line between this idea of, one could say, for lack of a better term, whether it's cosmic rebirth, whatever you want to call it, I'm the new version of myself, something like this, versus what we call sociopathy and narcissism. This idea that, okay, if you're focusing on yourself, by helping yourself, you understand yourself more and you can do more externally after the internal understanding. And by helping yourself, you help others. Now, in the process of understanding about yourself, to learn about yourself, to help others, that particular process point, people may in fact say, well, you're a narcissist, you're this, you're that, you're selfish. I want to be very clear in the fact that some people can take this ability, this tool, if you will, just like anything else, and lean it in the direction they want. But I do believe there, and I could be wrong, but at the moment, I believe there's a fine line between that concept. And if I may give a visual to understanding oneself, it's this idea that, again, you are the center or focal point of the point in which you are walking towards, or in this case, I represents an item, you're walking towards it. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that I bring this up because, again, I hate to say it like this, but I don't particularly, I've yet to find, whether in the equations or in the geometry or in the visuals, anything other than what we know as the Platonic solids, at least relative to this reality, that can in fact be manipulated to explain this, whether UAP, whether it's the a possibility of NPCs. And what I mean by that is even the freaking pyramids. Everything by definition, whether it's squaring the circle, the only way to, for example, I guess you could say, create a peak in energetic presence would be a triangle, for lack of a better term. It can't be a square. There's no peak in a square. There's no peak in a circle, right? So it seems to me that, again, if someone is walking towards something, that intersection point between the medium of them or you and the item you're walking towards is in fact the center point of that duality of collapsing the wave, which then takes us to this right over here, Hegel's or Hegelian dialectic, which is, again, thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis with respects to problem, reaction, solution. Now, what's interesting though is that we seem to live in a society where the solution is kind of like the item here. We never get to it. It's always just, oh, we're almost there, we're almost there. We never get to it. But hopefully enough people seem to be waking up in the sense that this synthesis speaks to the idea of balance, which to me as well is collapsing the wave, right? So thesis and antithesis are just each end of the spectrum, whether it's political, Republican, Democrat, this or that. And then, of course, we see here, if we were to draw an outline, we have the triangle, but then at the top, who's pulling the strings to enable this? And again, I'm not saying this in a bad way always. It's just a matter of self-growth. Once we realize ourselves and, for lack of a better term, embed into that synthesis, one then realizes that, okay, there's something here that's doing this. So that's
Uh,
where I go for that.
I love the shit out of this, dude. So whenever you talked about the item that you're going towards, and that it's maybe not even necessarily attainable, I don't think it needs to be. One of the things,
Right.
especially with the Hegelian dialect that you're talking about here, what this place seems, just from an energetic point of view, and what we're talking about here is an energetic system. It just wants your energy. It wants any bit of it that it can get. And so,
Right.
like this whole idea of the Hegelian dialect is because it pushes a narrative and it gets you scared. And so it contributes energy into the system. Just like if you're excited about buying a lottery ticket, you really think you're going to win. That energy is more palpable than you actually winning because it's a different thing because there's a lot of things that go along with that. But this is also where I've been kind of interrupting the Hegelian dialect from a personal perspective.
Sure. Yeah.
Anytime, and this I did it the best way I did it was turning off the news. So let's say that people want to scare you constantly, and really, like Sam Tripoli says, this is just a haunted house. People run around and just go and then they want you to go and that's it. No real harm can occur here. But what it does is the harm is in exchanging your energy. And back to something that you said about like even the reptilian folks, whatever. I'm reminded of the story of like Enlil and Enki, right? So you have like two completely polar opposite versions of the same being. So you've got two expressions of the energies always represented no matter where you are. And so this kind of polar opposite of like, yeah, he's a reptilian, but he's a really cool one, or like, oh, he's a reptilian, but he's shitty. He eats people's faces off. Now, from their point of view, that might not be shitty. It's just what they do. From our point of view, with the faces that are potentially in danger of being eaten here, then it's pretty sus, right? So if you look at this as well, you can look at this as an energetic system. And so again, it doesn't matter what the thing is, it's your reaction to the thing or your anticipation or excitement and energy about the thing. That's what's really prized here. And this is what I think, the whole Hegelian dialect with the predictive programming is all about. I think that they don't have the power that we have the power, and that they have to whisper in your ear what they want to create, and what they want to create is a fearful, divisive world. And as long as we allow that, that's what we're going to get. But the second that you switch that narrative and you choose the item that you're walking towards to be different, that's when everything switches for you. When you stop contributing energy into that system and stop feeding that egregore of fear.
Right. Which then begs to your point, it begs the question of, okay, why is it that it seems as though in every aspect of life, whether it's paying bills, whether it's this or that, there's a never ending, you could say, pursuit towards
Yes.
whether paying that bill, or again, once you've paid the bill, it's like, you've paid the bill here, and then again, it's like, okay, time to bring it back full circle, or at least half circle, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And then they, okay, and then you go, then you
There'll be
pay the
another
bill
bill to
again,
pay.
and then repeat, repeat. But what they don't want us to realize is that center point. And again, dare I say, we just illustrated the hemispheres of the brain. We just illustrated as well the, as above, so below. This concept of there being, again, synthesis, that middle point being the point of realization, which is that, holy crap, between myself and the object, it is just what I am perceiving, which then speaks to the idea of there being a difference between perception versus realization, for example. I am realizing that what I am perceiving is not all there is,
You got it.
right? So that's, yeah, I
And
would,
then you look around at barriers to this that are installed in society initially. So cognitive dissonance, for instance, people being ridiculed out of a tribe because tribe mentality, you got to survive. If you're being made fun of and nobody wants to hang out with you because you have weird ideas, then you're not going to survive the winter, right? Because you need all these tribe members. And so all of this is, again, kind of an energetic loosh farm. It's just a way to suck all your energy out there. And you don't have to participate if you don't want to. And this is one thing that I've
right.
really, really been hard telling everybody lately, or just informing the people that are curious. Hey, you don't have to contribute your energy to that system. Tend the garden you got. Focus on the eye that you want, and then don't worry about all the other distractions along the way.
I
It can be incredibly simple.
I
It's not
couldn't
easy,
agree
but it's
more.
simple. Hmm.
I would even dare to say that a lot of the complicated processes that one may imagine hypothetically it would take to get to attaining even a nuts and bolts creation of some of this alleged, phenomena, let's call it, is far simpler than people may think with respects to there being different, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, there being different types of methods to getting there.
Yeah.
And this idea that, again, we have to ask ourselves, even in the school system, what are we working towards ultimately?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The pursuit of happiness, right? That's what it's all about. It's built into the tenet of our kind kind of structure here. I know in our country anyway. And it's honestly this thing, and your visual is actually perfect for kind of what I think that this entire place is all about. I think that, with the, and again, just simply because we're presented with such extremes here, that middle line down there, the middle path, right? The middle way. This is what it's all about. You've got this, duality here, right? And perhaps what we're here to learn, if this is a game or a school or something like that, or a ride, then you're basically here to kind of get the extremes of both and figure out how to navigate through duality. And so this idea that there's like awful things about yourself that you absolutely hate, and this is what shadow work incorporates, is it's not, and shadow work has been hijacked and gaslighted as well. Shadow work, the best description of it that I've heard is it's not hating the worst parts of yourself or hating the darkest parts of yourself. It's loving the scariest parts of yourself. And so if you can kind of keep that in mind and not shun it, because if you're shunning it, then again, it's that item that you're moving towards with energy, and it's got a lot of energy. And this is not only that, it's a piece of yourself that you're denying. It's part of this system. And so I think with the extremes here, the extreme happy and extreme fear, there's a balance point in the middle, and that midway point, that middle path, perfectly illustrated by your design here, is kind of what I think that we're all here to do. If you had to like scale up and put a purpose to this, it's just navigating duality. And so it's not being too positively affected by things, but also too not negatively affected by things. And it's just that balance. It's
Well, it
very
speaks thank you, but it speaks to society in general. It's almost as if there's been an establishment in the system where it's kind of like, if you look too much into something,
mm.
don't worry about it. If you look too much big picture into something like a superstructure, don't worry about it either.
Yes, yes. It's the forest for the trees model. That if you're staring too close at a tree, you can't see the forest. That if you're staring way back at a forest, you can't get individual perception on a tree. And so, really being able to zoom in, zoom out, honestly, constantly with any subject that you've got. And a good way to keep you anchored in one perception is fear. It's an emotional tether that you have to anything. It's survival. It's, the way that this place is set up. And so to really niche down your attention, they just scare the shit out of you all the time. They're like, you should be afraid of this. But if you zoom out and you're saying, maybe I don't, maybe it's not even going on. Maybe the thing in Ukraine's not even happening. I don't know. I'm just like seeing videos of it, but it's all kind of bullshit in my mind anyway. So why would I contribute energy? Same thing with this whole like, Russia's going to nuke us and Putin said this and they're seeing nukes move and shit. Well, what does worrying about it do? It contributes energy to the system that just wants energy. That's the positive, but it's not going to matter. Like if they do drop a nuke, you want to be as close to that motherfucker as you can, because you're going to die anyway, right? If they throw several of them around. So what does it matter, right? If this thing drops, or even if you see it, what's worrying about it going to do? A friend of mine a long time ago said that he had a dream. I was in it with him. And he said that we were sitting on a car or something like that, and he saw a mushroom cloud go off over a city. And he said he was scared, running around like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. He said, I jumped up on top of the car and started dancing and saying, oh, it's here, it's happening, it's happening. And he was like, what are you doing? I go, what's it matter, right? So this is this approach of how you can kind of live your life, but with the energy that you're committed into something that was supposed to be negative being happy for you or valuable for you and seeing the value in it, that's what the system that presented that to you to scare you hates the most, is whenever you alchemize that energy into something that's useful for you.
Dude, to your point, you know what I just realized as well? We just drew here
A
what a
hammer.
lot of the ancient drawings have discussed as well with respects to these, sky beings with their craft and things like this. I just
Yeah,
realized that when
you
you look
drew
at,
a UFO.
yeah, but in other words, exactly, which speaks to the same concept of that regurgitation of the same methodologies required, whether in the physical, whether in the mental, the spiritual, whether in thought. It's the same understanding of life over and over again, whether it's in a negotiation with somebody, it's that as above, so below, that push, that pull of things.
And if you think about, yes, perfect. And if you think about a UFO, what is it, right? At its basic core, one of the more basic things that we talk about is, the top dome, the bottom dome, and a middle section. So you're talking now, you could use that as an analogy for as above, so below here, right? It takes positive energy and negative energy with the middle path stabilizing everything to make it all functional. Same thing with this reality. You need adversity. You need negative things here because it motivates you for the positive things. And that middle path is the balance between. So really our entire reality is this idea of a classic saucer-shaped UFO.
That's really, yes, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when you take a look, for example, at even if we look at some of the different sketches over here, this idea of excelling forward or working towards something, it's this idea that even when you're in your house, for example, you are the center point and your emittance is like dropping a rock in a pond.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with your energy in a crowd. Same with, I mean, driving through, walking through a forest, anything. And then the other thing about that is your energy is that, but you've got little droplets of ripples of energy all around you that are rippling out that you're sensing as well. Now, whether you're negatively or positively impacted by that's completely up to you, which is a very little known thing. Suffering's a choice, right? Like the Buddha said. So even with that, when you pluck and different things drop into the water around you, you can feel it. And this is another good way. That's a great analogy for like our astral body and our tetrahedron and the Merkaba and everything, because it senses these different vibrations, but also it's pulsing back out whatever you're resonating at as well. And so this, like we're talking about back to NPCs real quick, is just like this amount of, let's call them blue ripples. The blue ripples are the positive vibes are are few in number compared to, let's say, red ripples that are, negative vibes, are here to just watch the world burn, are here to facilitate the experience of ascension, of motivation for ascension, is kind of how I put those ideals. Now you can picture those red blips turning into a bunch of blue ones, and that map kind of filling with more blue blips or drops in water and affecting the current in that way, or the body of water, let's say, this energetic medium that we're all kind of swimming around in. It's very, very interesting, dude.
Kind of like it's a perturbation of a particular fluid, if you
Yes.
will.
Yes.
Got you.
Yes.
Got you. Well, brother, I just wanted to say actually, I think that this has been a fantastic recording. I think we're about to hit 30 minutes. We've condensed so much into one. I was wondering if maybe we could cut it here just to let everyone sort of resonate on just mixing the literature and the verbiage we used with the visuals, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
But before you go, if you could please tell my audience where and how you could be found.
Yeah, Brandon Thomas, Expanding Reality. Just find me at expandingrealitypodcast.com. It's the only link you'll ever need. It links you to everything else. Go sign up to become an expansive insider to hear these collaborations, plus all the bonus stuff. We got a bunch of panel things going on over there, which has been awesome. Definitely check that out. Do some research on NPCs or just let your mind wander. And I think this is a good call because this is a lot. You and I do this. We just info dump and then let people just kind of, because any one of these concepts is pretty mind blowing and it'll take you a minute to really assess and assimilate and integrate. And so really spend some time on these theories. Of course, you can reach out at expandingrealitypodcast.com if you want to contact and talk more. But much love, dude. Dave, this is always fun, man. Always. You get my
This
mind
is
going.
great, man. I appreciate it a ton. Patreon.com/Generation Z for those that are that haven't checked it out. We're also Generation ZZED podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and other places. And yeah, that's basically about it. As Brandon said as well, this will be just for the members, and I appreciate it a ton, man.